Hi, Benji. I add myself into agendas as PR.
Hi, Evan. Good to see you. I really need to fix the formatting of the agendas because it does everything through Prettier now. We really need to opt out the attendance from it. Otherwise, it keeps formatting it for everyone's pull requests, which is frustrating. Oh, you're muted.
And by the way, about template, like my GitHub handle is the longest one in most of the meeting, so I need to adjust like a table,
Yeah,
like horizontally. So I think like, and I'm not the only one. Some people probably have like long surname or something. So I maybe make it like wider.
yeah, definitely. That needs to happen.
Hello, hello.
Hey.
And how are things? Everybody
Good.
okay?
Yeah, I went to the wrong Zoom somehow again this week, so I don't know how that is. I must have an old calendar link or something, so that's probably on my side. So hello all.
Lee says that theoretically the foundation calendar is now fixed, so everyone should be going to the right location.
Yeah, it's probably just I have the old one synced locally. I went from my local calendar, so yeah. Okay, good to know. I'll resync it anyways. Well, happy Thursday. How is everyone?
Well, good.
Awesome. Went to get my winter tires put on my car this morning, only to find out my dealership lost one of my wheels. Yeah, it's kind of hard to drive away when you only have 3 wheels, so that was fun. Yeah.
But is it required in Canada to have them?
Some parts of Canada it is mandated by law. Our province doesn't do that. But what they do is if you basically you'll get a reduction on your insurance if you say you'll use them, type of thing. But the province beside us, it is mandated by law, Quebec, and that you have to have winter tires. And unfortunately, what that means is people are so annoyed that that's a law, they buy winter tires and then they drive with them all year long. So it's kind of like they needed to put a law that's the exact opposite of that in as well, to say, well, you have to switch them back out to not have winter tires during the summer because it's super dangerous to drive with those during the summer.
Because it's not made for wet.
That's it.
Roads, I think.
Yeah, and the heat too, they just melt. And anyways, yep. So yeah, we don't have that law here, so that's good.
Yeah, we essentially in Switzerland, it's like if you don't have them, and you have an accident, then the insurance doesn't pay.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. So they get you the insurance. The government doesn't have to make the law. They know that they'll get you at the insurance level. Ugh. Yeah. Yeah, we got our first big snowfall here a couple days ago. So of course that has everybody thinking about winter tires.
Welcome, Matt. Looks like we're all here.
Group. Yeah. Small group.
Is Lee coming, or is he?
Lee can't make it today, so he's asked me to facilitate the meeting. So I'll kick us off. I mean, we all know this, but nonetheless, by attending here, we've all agreed to the membership specification membership agreement, the participation and contribution guidelines, and the code of conduct. We have all added ourselves to the agenda. And we all know that this is being recorded and will go out on YouTube. So first of all, hi everyone, I'm Benji. If you'd like to introduce yourselves in the order in the agenda.
Hi, I'm Rob.
Am I next? I don't have it. Yeah. Hi, I'm Michael. I'm from Chili Cream.
Hi, Hugh from Apollo. Matt, I think
I'm
you're up.
Matt from Meta.
Hi, Ivan from Apollo.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Oh, welcome, Yakov.
Perfect timing, Yakov.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, it's Yakov. I just added a PR for myself. Thanks.
Perfect. That's merged. Okay. Ideally, someone would take notes, please. Normally that would be me, but I will probably be busy today. Any volunteers?
I can try to chip in.
Awesome. Thank you, Yakov. Okay. Step one is to review the agenda. On today's agenda is apparently not the thing that I thought I'd added earlier, is the defer and stream topic. And let me just merge this item, which I forgot to merge. Also mentioning the TSC elections. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add to the agenda for today? No, excellent. I would like to mention that the GraphQL Foundation conference videos are now live on YouTube, so you can track those down through the playlists on there. We shall move on to the action items. I don't think that there are any new action items to be reviewed. Has anyone advanced an action item or wants to close any action items? Okay, we can always return to that later on in the meeting. In the meantime, breezing through all these items at the moment, agenda items. The TSC elections are coming up. So as you all know, we have the TSC, which is Lee plus 10 others. They work in a cycle of 2-year stints offset by 1 year. So 5 people start 1 year, 5 people start the next year. Everyone serves a 2-year term. So this year we have 5 people coming up for the end of their term. They may, if they wish, re-nominate themselves for another term. Other members of the community may also nominate themselves, and then we will be having a vote for the TSC members that are staying on will vote to see who will join us for the next term. Due to time conditions, we've been a little late running this compared to usual, so we've pushed the time frame back for this by a month. So those that would have ended their term on the 31st of December now actually end their term on the 31st of January. And I think the vote will take place very beginning of January. So if you'd like to put yourself forward for that, or if indeed you are expiring and you would like to come back again, please do fill out the self-nomination form. And if there's anyone that you think in the community would make a great TSC member, please again let them know that this is going on. Any questions on that?
Looks good.
Okay, excellent. In which case, on to you, Rob, with defer and stream.
All right, so at the last meeting, we talked about defer and stream in subscriptions and potentially not shipping that feature as part of this initial spec, pushing it off to later. And I think there was general consensus on that. but then it came down to the question of exactly how we would do that. Going to share my screen 1 second. So yeah, so we agreed that we weren't going to support subscriptions as part of this initial spec. That is something that we can come later, and the main reason is so that we could have more in-depth discussions on multiplexing and that sort of thing. So I was hoping that we could get consensus on exactly how we're going to disable it now. Basically, the two options are disable with the validation rule or disable with a field error. Validation rule is pretty clean, but that basically means that you can't have any defer or stream directive in the subscription query at all. I brought up that could be a problem if you want to share your fragments between a query and a subscription, or a mutation and a subscription. So the other option would be disable via a field error, which would happen during execution. So now we could only raise that error if the defer or substream is not disabled with the if argument. So now you can share your fragments. You just have to make sure you pass in a variable to the subscription that turns off all of the defers or streams. Yeah, so I left this comment here. I was in favor of moving forward with option 2. Even in my code base, we use relay, and where components are coupled with fragments and they're shared in a lot of places. And even our use of subscriptions isn't really about like rapid fire small changes, but kind of like someone made an update to like a pretty large document, and we'll get that update back in. So I could very easily see us running into the situation, and I would imagine that other people do as well. So yeah, and I think that it would just be a shame not to take advantage of defer, because this fragment also happens to be used in a subscription. It's not easy to refactor if this fragment is like many fragments deep. And yeah, and Matt brought up that a compiler could remove it if you're using relay compiler could do that. But a lot of clients don't have compilers, so it wouldn't always be, you wouldn't always have that option. So I would like to move forward with the field error approach, but is there any dissent against that?
I can chime in for Apollo. We agree with that approach. Most of those thumbs ups are folks that are working on both the web and mobile client at Apollo, so we agree with it.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I would like for there to be a validation rule that says that there at least must, like, if you're in a subscription, there must, like, you must at least be able to turn it off. But that's like, that's just because for people that use compilers, having the error come earlier is better, but that's super easy to add on. That's like not, that should not block this at all.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I can add that.
Yeah, like I'm also for this, but just for like protocol, just for to mention like as a potential problem. One big not big, like one downside is that like potentially you need to test like during the development cycle of application, you need to ensure that all the flags, you test all combination of all flags to be sure that you not have a runtime error when somebody do something. Like, I don't think a lot of queries have flags based on user data. But if somebody have like flags set up by user data for some reason, like to omit or include something, and they have like a bad testing procedure, they can run into situations when they deploy something and they will have like unexpected errors. I think it's like niche scenario, but like it's the only problem I can see with like second approach, and I'm for it actually. Just wanted to mention there is like potentially like downside.
The situation you're describing is that I go and add defer to a fragment, test it that it works on the query, looks great, commit, push to prod, forget that that's also used somewhere in a subscription.
Yeah, and especially like you like your flags based on which like skip include works is based on like user data, for example, like based on some stuff that user like choose in a form, for example, or like based on type of user or something. So because of that, like some fields executed and not executed a different situation, and you did it without like fully covering all like possible permutations. And one of permutation is triggering defer or stream in subscription. Yeah, but it's kind of like personally, I think it's a niche, especially since I think we all agree it's a temporary solution.
Yeah, if we had fragment arguments, we could we could make it that the validation is, even now we could make it that you must have a variable defined on your subscription that defaults to false. And if we had fragment arguments, we could be, that variable must in fact be hard coded. Like it must be a fragment argument that gets like hard coded somewhere in the query. But like it sucks that you can end up in that kind of situation Yvonne's describing, but like we do have a plan to resolve that by enabling defer in some way, like solving it on subscriptions eventually. So I don't know.
So I think we can definitely add a validation rule that makes sure that any defer or stream that is used has an if condition, and that if condition is either the constant false, in which case why have you added it, or is a variable, right? That should be fine for this. Then we've only got the situation where someone passes that variable but sets it true. And I think at that point, that is something that the user is probably triggering for themselves. I think most users, when they use defer and stream, aren't going to add conditional arguments. That would be my guess. So if we have the validation rule that forbids those from being used in subscriptions, the fact that it has an argument, I think, is going to convey a lot of intent to the developer that this should be something that is turned off in some situations. Probably subscriptions, probably because of what they've named the variable, let's hope. But yeah, I think a validation rule and the option to field error work well together.
Yeah, I like that compromise. That would be great, because then you also educate the users with the error message, with the validation error message. And yeah, I think that is really the way forward.
So the validation rule is only for the combination of defer or stream on a subscription operation with no if argument.
Yeah.
or where the
I
if
mean, we still,
argument is not a variable.
Right.
And you'd want to, yeah, basically the validation rule on the PR that adds the validation rule, we can get into like specifics, but we'll want to be like very crisp on, hey, this has to be turned off for subscriptions because it's not yet supported in the spec. It's like, this is a tricky combination of features that we haven't worked through yet, which is why it must end up being false. And like at runtime, this argument must be false.
All right, I'm going to move forward with that then. I'll update GraphQL JS and the spec PR.
Awesome. So what's next for Defer Stream then? Yakov, I know you had some discussions that we tried to get some time to talk about in past meetings, and I don't know if we ever worked through them fully, but are those still things that are outstanding before we start to talk about moving Defer Stream further ahead in the stages?
So I think what you must be referring to is my suggestion to you that we use aliased
Yes, that's the one.
fragments, that we demand alias fragments. And that basically, but I want to take a step back from that exact suggestion. That was basically to solve a problem, if I'm remembering back, that Ivan raised about how we can ensure that that the client knows that when we are quote unquote not honoring Defer Stream, meaning when the server has determined that it's more efficient to just send all the data, how we can signal to the client that the data has been sent in an initial payload. So that's a problem that we're trying to solve. And so that's kind of, I guess, the outstanding problem, where with that suggestion being one approach to solving it. But I think that's basically the outstanding problem. One option is to ship it as is, and solve it later. Just ship it. I'm of the thought that we can, we waited this long. We want to make sure that we've thought that one through. There is something else that I'm working on in the back of my mind, or when I have time, in terms of trying to optimize Defer Stream to not branch executions and not repeat fields at all. I don't think that necessarily has to conflict with this, this initial rollout. I mean, that could just be a different approach, especially because it comes with its own trade-offs in terms of managing state as to which fields have already been sent. So that's another thing that I have been working on, and there's been very little movement, but some in terms of a proposal to get that forward. But I don't think that's going to hold up. But Ivan's issue is what I think maybe we could just is like the last pending thing that I know of. But Rob might know more.
Is the issue, Ivan? Is your issue broken out in the discussions board? I didn't see that one there.
Yeah, I think I created. I can quickly refresh. Like the whole purpose of Defer is to allow incremental rendering. At least like most people have this use case. They wanted to partially render something, and when you partially render something, you need to know if you got it or not, and like it's stupid to have like a spinner or like unrendered stuff until, even though it's like shipped, but have something spinning until you get like last like package. So, and I basically show like edge case. My main idea is not only about edge case. Edge case is like a hard problem. It's like I can prove it's a problem in current approach, but there is like another more subtle issue that if stuff is inline, client need to do like more work. It's need to parse a query, understand like where stream and defer is placed, and understand that something is inline. Like in most clients, I never used relay, but I expect you get some like callback or something when defer is like shipped. When you get defer part from a server, something gets called. And in current approach, when we allow to inline stuff, it's mean like client need to constantly check like responses and like at least like first response and see like if stuff gets inline or not, which is like especially for dynamic clients, ones that like don't have compilation step, it's hard. They need to like parse query, go through IST, see like what gets deferred and see if it's inline or not, which like complicates stuff. So I actually propose a fix there. Yeah.
I see it. Yeah, got it. Sorry, I missed this one. So
Yeah.
this is the, sorry, go ahead, man.
Go ahead.
No, after you.
Sure. An interesting thing here that kind of it brings up is like we could, so as Michael Steib was pointing out, like what he's doing is basically adding these fulfill defer labels. And if that's what we do in Relay, that's what we do, like my client that isn't Relay does as well. That seems like if basically every smart client is going to end up putting those anyways, it might just make sense to essentially have that label be itself a fragment alias, in which case, and like the thing is that would produce, it probably should just produce a key, but not necessarily like a key and a triple or something that isn't necessarily the type name or but just like key and, oh, this fulfill, like the server is deferring, or the server has already completed, or the server like basically provide a hook of some form to say, yes, some field, like, yes, the fulfilled defer or defer label defer is either in the process or has come back. But I don't know. That was a little rambly. Sorry about that.
Matt, you had a proposal at one point to add like a standard field, like the is fulfilled one.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So we are experimenting with having something like that. It makes some things clean, but I don't love it as a like solution for defer and stream, just because it's like we would basically need the server to know that a fragment alias or an at defer with label or whatever means that it must push in that key. So that's fine-ish, but really I think that we need some way. Yeah, as Yakov just put, the reference proposal, like the reference proposal I think is a little bit cleaner, where we like can say, hey, this spread, tell me what the reference is. Either it's here, it's going to be in some deferred payload with some label, or it like never even, it's never going to be fulfilled, so it's null or unset or something like that.
I think we've got another slight problem as well, right? So there is knowing whether or not a fragment is complete, but there's also knowing whether or not a list has been completed. So in, say, like a Facebook feed, you might have a bunch of posts and then comments on each of those. If you're pulling down a stream of comments under each of them, once one's pulled down all three, we need to know that that like substream is complete, even though all the other ones may still be streaming. So that would still be the same named labeled stream, but it occurs in multiple positions because by nature of it being inside of a list already.
Yeah, we did talk about that, and there's a separate issue for it. I'm not sure if I'll find it right now. Yeah, this one. And I think that we also kind of decided to try to solve this later with an additional field on the response, probably something like that. It was like we did, I remember the last discussion we talked about like has next, and has next refers to the entire GraphQL stream of requests. And there was like, should it also, and I think that we decided that we wouldn't want to reuse that name has next to also indicate that this like specific stream was done, and we would put another, the way to solve this is to have another field somewhere there. Stream has next or something, but in the previous discussions, it didn't come up that this was like a blocker for moving forward with stream, and it was something that we could do later. So I think that it's mostly this one now, which only applies to defer, right?
So like just like brainstorming. One thing I just like thought about. Can we have some entry for finished stuff? So like meaning like I understand like people want to get stuff in line in the data, but yeah, like I have simple proposal requiring everything incremental, but the issue there people raise is like about the caching and not like doing like can we have like efficient just a stuff for somebody to think, and I will try to think myself about it. Maybe we should have like a mechanism signaling this set of defers are finished explicitly, not inside the data, but somewhere. And same for stream. So like we have inside incremental, I mean like inside incremental or inside like some other top level field have like stuff that finished or in line.
Maybe you can post an example on the discussion.
Yeah, I will think about some example. I don't have a solution now. I just never thought like, yeah. And just to reiterate, like there is like, I don't remember current status, but there is a position to propose fix, to fix that I proposed in a thread, right? So I will come up with alternative solution. At least I will try to. Then I'll show example. It's don't fix like Benji's problem of creating too many like creating big response if you put a lot of defers, but I will try to think something.
So, Rob, would you mind jumping back to just the full list of discussions for a second? So that's the one main one that's here that we think has to be resolved. Are there any other discussions here that need to be called out in particular as things that are blocking defer stream from moving further ahead?
I think I need to go over this list one more time and make sure that everything that is resolved has the resolved label.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, and I see there are questions in there too that are just questions.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they need to be taken out. Cool. Well, exciting. So I guess, Ivan, you're going to add some more content into the one main discussion, and we'll have some more discussion there, and we'll figure out how we want to handle that. But then what's next for defer stream? Do we Yakov, do you think the extra things that you had added in here need to be considered before we start trying to push to get defer stream pushed further ahead in the stages, or do we all feel pretty good that we can start to move in that direction?
I think this inlining, I mean, I'm not sure how other people feel about it. I think the inlining discussion, meaning like, how does a client know what to expect? I think we may have to tool around with solutions to that. But you know, I'm sure we can find it, you know, we can find a solution that works that we can sort of add on later. I'm not sure, you know, I'm not sure, there are, I guess, pros and cons to waiting, and I don't have a strong opinion.
Okay.
So I know Lee probably has strong thoughts on this, but
yeah.
I'm of the opinion, if we are like defer and stream would be way better if we had these like inline labels in the data itself. And that's just like, we have a very strong opinion on that. I think it might be worth basically rushing some form of inline fragment alias or like fragment key. I don't want to say like the fragment aliasing that means that the fragment like result is all a like separate, a completely separate thing. Although with defer and stream, it kind of ends up that anyways. So, but having some form of like, we can know inline whether this fragment actually happened, however that is, like, that might be worth like 2 or 3 of us just getting together and really getting deep and iterating over the course of like a week or 2. And I'd be happy to be involved in that.
Okay.
I mean, I think going back to some of the things in the comments, just to make sure they're in the live stream, I think Benji's point from earlier, you know, we do have a problem with about stream also being an issue, that possibly all the results might be inlined or might not into an original response, and references or you know, is fulfilled type or even fragment, real fragment aliases wouldn't solve that. At least my initial thinking about it. I think that's a good point. So I'm not sure if we need to have the exact same solution for that, but I think we do need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, there might be a way to have the aliasing, the like alias wrapper thing that we do apply to fields too, in which case it might also be able to apply to stream, but I don't know.
I mean, I would definitely be interested in, like you said, iterating like a rapid pace. Sounds really exciting, actually.
So just to clarify, problem with stream, it's a question if like I put an initial count of 10, there is like 100, but server decides that it can ship like 100 immediately, and it's in line not 10 but 100, and this is like a question, right? Is that stream is like finished by inlining like the whole array instead of inlining like a small array, right? With
Yeah,
I think-
so I think it's much more obvious if you think of it in terms of not passing any arguments to stream, i.e. the initial count is 0. So then you get an empty array in your GraphQL response, which could be an empty array, or it could be a placeholder for what is later going to stream.
Okay.
And specifically, if you have any other, like if the only thing in your request is that one stream, then you can differentiate it with the has next. But the has next in the initial payload, right? But if there's any other defer or stream anywhere else, you don't know, okay, so you have has next true. Does that apply to this stream? Does this apply to some other defer? Does this like, yeah, you just can't do anything. Like you can't know
So,
that you're getting more in that one.
Basically, if I have front page and I have like a news feed and like messages, so like, and both are streams, it's mean like, even though that I got like no new messages, but until like I get the whole news feed, like my messages will show like a spinner. I also think it's pretty critical in the same idea. It's like basically it's create a corner case for a problem that stream is trying to solve. And I expect like QA engineers like or automatic, so like I expect like people testing this corner case and come up like if they're like doing full coverage of their product, they come up with test case, and every company that use like stream having discussion what to do, and eventually deciding is probably not that a big issue, but like wasting a ton of time for every company to figure out it's not a problem in their product, but a problem in GraphQL.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think we probably have already considered this, but now that we have the incremental key, it might be the case that we should really just, for stream and maybe even defer, we should have which ones have been fulfilled in the initial payload's incremental. And yeah, it looks like Yakov. Yeah, exactly like what Yakov has on the chat, where it's like,
Yeah,
okay,
and,
yeah.
And additional benefits, it's allow like dump clients without. So like imagine you have a dump client that don't parse a query. It allows this client to understand like what it's waiting for, basically. So if I didn't look into Oracle or some other simple clients, but I expect Oracle probably is not parsing query. So and somebody tried to build callback to like callback to a label, saying like when this label is fulfilled, please call me. And like a client has no way to understand like if this label shipped or not until it's like parse a query. So this solution, I think like it's ideal in that sense. It doesn't require client to be super smart. It's like facets have like a path inside, so client don't need to like parse query to understand. Because if client just have a label saying this is fulfilled, it still need to parse a query to understand what's fulfilled. But here it's like a path, so I think it's ideal solution in a sense. Except one point that Benji raised about like explosion, about like creating too many like entries inside incremental. But I think it's like denial of service prevention should be done like by like validation rule, or like validation limit, saying you should not have more than like that number of
The query
incrementals.
complexity analysis algorithms that exist should take that into account.
Yeah, something
It's-
like that. Yeah.
So this was something Michael Stead brought up, which was that's really hard because as soon as you have nested streams, you can end up having just an explosion of incremental responses. But that's hard. I don't know, like.
Yeah,
I
but
have
you
a
need
really
runtime
simple
limit.
potential solution to that, and that is just don't allow nesting them. Not as in a validation rule, just in terms of only allow one level of defer or only require one level of it, and then have the server just ignore anything beyond that in the default implementation.
I mean, we could also make it very clear that servers are allowed to just like drop, like you can have a stream and the server can give you an error of like, hey, I was able to give you 3 elements in this stream and I can't keep going, which kind of solves that too. It would be like really annoying from a client perspective on how to handle that, but like at least from the server end, you could you could basically say, hey, if the client has required me to do more than 100 batches after those after the 100th batch, I'm just quitting. I'm done with it.
Yeah, I mean, we do have that in the spec that the server should do it. And there's a note about advanced use cases, you're allowed to ignore it, which is kind of what brings up the whole discussion that Ivan brought up about distinguishing whether it was actually deferred or not. But I think it does rule out the proposed fix, that original proposed fix of either you have to defer everything or not. You have to defer and stream everything or not. And the allowing the top level one but not the nesting one would be in conflict of that. But I think the type of thing that we're talking about now of metadata about what is deferred or not could solve for that in a better way. So I like the idea of having a bunch of deep dive meetings with everyone interested and brainstorming and seeing what we align on then before coming back to this meeting.
The other thing with the I noticed Yakov was really smart to do, like the other thing with the incremental metadata is you only have to put what has not completed, which is kind of nice also, because presumably there should be less things queued up to batch in a general sense. So like the amount of items in incremental should tend towards being pretty small.
And for backwards compatibility of there not being something, meaning that
Exactly.
we did what we did before.
But you are allowed to send some, like basically if a server has the data ready for the initial payload, it's allowed to not even include that in the incremental piece. and the client knows that it, like, yeah, I am at streaming this, but because it's not under the incremental at all, that means that it is like, it's done. I don't need to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
So it sounds like solution, I think. Yeah. Since you propose it, Jakub, can you like post it in a thread? Yeah. So we will have other people commenting on solution.
I mean, just for the stream case, you mean? Or, well, I'll link to, I guess, to the...
both. Or like one is a link to proposed solution and another thread, because it's so like stuff for both. Like it's different examples for stream and different example for defer, but yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Excellent. I have to say, one of my main concerns about stream and defer is still this potential explosion of the payloads. We already have enough people that say, you know, GraphQL is dangerous because of this, that, and the other, and we're effectively giving them another crank to turn to explode things further. So this could be a potential security issue, denial of service issue, that kind of thing. So going into this with eyes open, I think is critical, and not rushing it out before then. I wonder if we can put wording in the spec where the server should defer or stream the first layer and should not, or it is recommended that you don't stream or defer any further levels. You still may, you can, but if we put a note next to it, as we should whenever there's a should or a should not, we can put a note that says, this could lead to much larger payloads, so we recommend against it, kind of thing. I think that for the majority of use cases, and I may be wrong on this, but I feel that the majority of use cases, you want something that renders now and then stuff that comes along later. And I don't think you're really worried about the nested later for within those and later for within those. There's certainly like widget pages where it might be useful for, but I think for the majority of use cases, we don't care so much about it. That's my personal belief.
I think that that's true for defer and stream as they exist today. Like today, defer and stream are not like, how do I reduce the cost to my server, but instead, how do I push the cost of getting an interaction up quickly to my server? And there's another world where the question is, how do I, on the client, explain to the server what's okay to leave out and I can get later? In that world, you actually do want the server to not give you the nested stuff, so that only when you actually like reach that point in the tree on the client do you actually start like telling the server, hey, I hit the fourth element in the list. Now you need to give me the information in it. Within that list, I hit the fourth element in the nested list, so get me that one. Like, but with defer and stream as they exist today, they're not yet a tool that you could really use for that. So I think that that's correct.
So in a database, we have things like cursors, right, which kind of do this same thing. You ask for a certain number, and then you get a cursor that you can continue to pull from later. This is more complex because it's multi-dimensional, but yeah.
You need a bidirectional stream from the client and server. or some piece of state that you pass to a new stream.
Like you can solve this, but it's basically like more ergonomic splitting of queries.
Mhm.
Right, because you can always solve this by just having more queries, doing more smaller queries that are split up. But
just a quick question about defer and stream support in GraphQL JS. Right now, the GraphQL JS README is pointing people to the experimental-stream-defer npm tag. That's pointing to a 16.x version of GraphQL JS. Is that accurate still? I think everything's
Yeah, that's
only
not
going into
accurate
17.
anymore. It's in the latest alpha. So I'll open a PR to update that.
Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah, just wanted to call that out.
One point back on the explosion of payloads. At some point, we may be able to. Right now, whenever you use stream, updates will be pushed one at a time. But we do have the ability now that we're pushing those single updates inside an array. We do have the ability to batch them. And so then if you have like defer nested under that stream, presumably you would have the ability to batch those. I mean, the client could specify that they want their, in a potential future argument, that they want, the first initial 10 items, and then they want every next set of 10 items as they're ready. And so then if you have a set of deferred fields on those, they would presumably, meaning a nested defer under that stream, presumably those nested fields would only come in, would retain that same grouping, and so they would also be sent 10 at a time, and so that could significantly reduce payload explosion once that feature, if it passes muster, is added.
I think if you think with the black hat on, as it were, the head of the attacker, even in that situation, it would be very easy to have those, even though you're batching the execution of those things, if we still require that the payload for each of the deferred chunks comes out in a particular format, you are requiring that the same content is repeated over and over again in the same payload. Even if it only differs, each one only differs by one field, it can still have a very large then subselection where it maybe pulls in another fragment. So I think as an attacker, you could make the server do a lot of work this way. And it's partly because we don't do the field merging. We don't say, all of this is just going to come later. I mean, if we just saw this as a patch system and we didn't have labels and we didn't say that this was kind of consistent, we just sort of said, anything you defer, we're going to send you a patch with those fields in later. Anything that, has already been served, we'll just give it to you. Then the amount of data being transferred would be much less, but that's not what we're doing. And that does lead to this ballooning problem.
Well, I think maybe we should talk about it offline, because I'm thinking I'm missing. Let's say there's a 1,000 member list, and the client has a validation rule that they want to be strict, so they only ask for an initial set of 500, and then they can ask that the second set be sent in, also with a size of 500 if they want. Meaning, so the client, so you could set up whatever validation rule you want or whatever complexity rule you want to reject anything that the server feels is potentially abusive. So that's what I mean. I mean, if we think about the most strict form of stream, you could even say that you just want the data in terms of 2 very large payloads. I mean, but we could talk about it offline, and I might gain a better understanding.
Yeah, you're right about the stream, and you can send all of those streamed items along. It's the second level. If we still then honor any nested defers within that, that's where things start to balloon out. But I think we should encourage people not to honor those, is what I'm basically arguing.
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is those nested defers, you know, we could also retain that same level of grouping and that same level of batching, you know, with that feature. Yeah, I mean, again, this is all in advance, you know, we don't have such a feature now. So I see your point very well for the current state.
Excellent. Well, this
I
has
have a
been
question.
a wonderful discussion. We're about an hour in, so if we want to keep it going, we can, but otherwise I suggest that we draw the meeting to a close.
Yeah.
Do you have yeah.
Well, yeah, one small thing before we finish, and do we have like a separate discussion about the whole denial of service thing with like response explosion? Because like it's discussed in context of like things that can potentially make it worse. Like this discussion thread that I started can make it worse, but it's not the like it's not like the root cause for this problem. So it's problem on its own. But we discuss it only in context of like stuff that like totally another solution that now we have like Jakub proposed solution that is not make it worse. So it's like now it's like orthogonal discussion. So like to continue it offline, maybe since Benji you proposing it, like have separate discussion, or you already started one, right? Oh, okay. So
yeah, I don't think I've laid it out quite as strongly as a security thing as how I feel about it, and maybe putting some stronger wording in there, or opening a specific discussion with regard to security would be wise. But yeah, there is that original discussion.
Okay, it was like one last comment before like you try to close the meeting. It's good that we can continue discussion offline, and it's like address my concern.
Awesome. Anything else from anyone? I guess we do have an action item on sort of iterating you know, quickly on that suggestion that Matt suggested. I guess we should, you know, we can do that offline, but we should remember we should remember to like arrange that follow-up.
Yep.
Oh, and for people not in the US, next week is a 3-day week for most of us. So yeah, we should get that in so that we can probably by early December have something like figured out. Yeah, I can own that action item.
Awesome.
Matt, I've described it terribly in the notes, so if you could polish that up for me, that would be great. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks all. Enjoy the rest of your day for sure.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Talk soon. Bye.